Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me Aaron Dowen, who is one of
Nailed it.
the co-owners of Catalytic Comics Studios. So go check them
Close.
out, and the writer of Tilt and Everville. So welcome to the show.
What's up? Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, now I'm excited because obviously I've read the Tilt, and I'm not going to ruin issue 3 because I know that's sort of going out to Kickstarters and everybody backed it, but there's some fun stuff going on. But we are going to be talking about issues 1 and 2. Fair warning to everybody out there. And also, we're going to be talking about Everville. But before we get all into all of that and talk about both of these comics and some other stuff that's going on, my audience, a good chunk of them are probably hearing about Catalyst Comics for the first time. And so, how did this company form up? How did you meet Matt, the co-owner, and also the artist on Everville? And what's the story behind that for people who don't know what this company is and how it formed up and what type of comics you produce?
Yeah, so back in 2017, I was closet writing, is what I call it. I was closet writing some superhero stuff, just for kicks and giggles, practicing scripting. I mean, I've been writing since I was a little kid, short stories and stuff, and got older, you get away from stuff, and then kind of came back around to the idea of what if I actually tried to put effort into this whole thing. And so I had a friend with me at the time who kind of just fizzled off into nothing. But he actually started the company with me, and he had a bunch of family drama stuff happen, and then was just like, I can't do this anymore. Right before that happened, I had gotten introduced to Matt through a mutual friend, whose name is Lewis Small Jr. People might know him from Vampirella and some 90s. He did a lot of the 90s comic books for like DC, Marvel, a lot of the Vampirella stuff as well. But we met through him mutually, and we kind of hired Matt to do our first crossover book. And then that guy, like I said, dissipated into thin air, left me holding Catalyst. And so we revamped everything, and that's when we started working on Paradigm issue 1, which is our first ever comic, and that was my first script, and it was Matt's first art. So we both got together because we were just trying to figure out how this thing works, what it's like building a comic book, and just putting forth the effort. And once that happened, we started growing from there and did shows in 2019. And at some point in 2019, I asked Matt to come on as co-owner. And so after Paradigm came out, we got together with Joe DeSantos, who did the art for Till. So that story's been rolling ever since July of last year. And then Welcome to Everville was the next book that Matt and I did together. And that's our first horror comic. So Catalyst Comic Studio kind of became a more than just superhero books. Both of us have the end game goal for it to be just a full publishing house, not just for my work. In fact, the superhero stuff I plan to hand off to other writers so I can focus on the other side of stuff, building more of the entertainment stuff. We do a lot of like voiceover work and creating videos and that kind of stuff. We want to move into a little bit more, and the only way to do that is to free up some more time on doing comics. So that way, him and I can just do all these random side stories that we want to tell, and then have the other stuff kind of just trucking along. But yeah, it's been about 3 years since the idea of the company, but we've only been publishing since March of last year.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that before we get into Tilt and all that stuff and the comic side of
Yeah.
everything. So, what was that experience like, really just building your first comic book? Because there's a lot of resources that are out there, but there's been a lot more in recent years. I mean, I would say back 2015, even if you go 2 years before Catalyst was formed, indie comics weren't where they were. And then if
Yeah.
we fast forward, I think the indie movement, and I came in a little bit, and maybe I'm biased, and maybe you could correct me, fill me in a little bit if I'm incorrect, but definitely I came in more 2018, and I saw a massive change. And I was a little bit ignorant back 2015, 2016, but I feel like there's been night and day on that
Yeah.
front tremendously. So, what
I,
was that entire experience like, and what was it even like for indie comics back
I think I would
2015?
echo that actually. In reality, we had the concepts and things going on during 2017, but we didn't really try In fact, our first Kickstarter campaign for Paradigm Issue One, it was it was a awful experience. We funded, but it was an awful experience because we didn't have those resources. And that's literally why we started our podcast, is because we felt like, well, let's let people learn from all of our mistakes, and that's the whole ideology behind it. And we thought, what if people did have more resources? They knew what it was actually like, behind the scenes when you're trying to put out a comic. And the reality is, in the beginning, if you're making a comic, you meet a lot of shady people, because most of us, we're trying to either keep costs low or trying to meet the right people.
A lot of
To meet
artists
the right
screw
people, you got to meet a lot of wrong people. But yeah, so it was. We had that time period where things were pretty shady, a little bit shaky. Once we started publishing and people actually realized we could complete a project, is when we realized there really was a real strong indie comics movement. We didn't realize that until Tilt 2, like the second issue of Tilt was coming out. That's when we started getting involved with the community, with people like like Chuck Pino and all them. We didn't know any of these guys up until the end of last year. So we were kind of just out there frolicking and throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what worked, and just kind of keeping our heads in the game. And now that we've met all these people, it's, well, let's try to glean wisdom from anybody we can. And so now I think it's just a natural growth process. When you start, you don't really know where to go. You don't know what resources you need to be taking in. And then once you do know, then it's like, okay, well, what do I do to level up? And that's all we do.
Yeah, and I also think that in 3 years ago, indie comics were not where they were. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. There's been a significant change in something, and I'm going to throw out a hint, and hopefully some people get it, but Cyberpunk 2077 should be the hint for everybody out there. But I digress, and if you know where I'm going with that, you'll understand later on in this interview why I threw it out there. But you mentioned Tilt, so let's dive into Tilt, because Tilt is definitely superhero-esque. It's fascinating, kind of Patrick Tilt, or I'm not even sure how to say his last name, but obviously
that's pretty close. Yeah, I mean it's a Irish last name, and I picked the last name because in Irish it means flight, which is one of his main superpowers. So Tilt was a natural progression after that. Yeah,
pretty much. I'm just gonna fill everybody in on this story for so everybody's caught up here. Patrick can levitate. His parents are sort of, I guess, religious. They think he's possessed. They send him away, and he, quote unquote, sort of becomes kidnapped, as a child soldier, doing mercenary work pretty much. And then the second he can escape, he does. And then he just goes back to the city where he was, and then he wants to sort of stop the people who have taken him and stop them, and maybe wants a little bit of revenge too, to some degree, which is sort of natural. And that's where the story goes on a very basic level, and we're going to dive into some more elements of it in a second. But where did that idea even come from? Because it is a little bit tropey, but it also goes in a very different direction than what you would expect, where it does have humor in it, and it's got a lot of other things that I thoroughly enjoy.
And the whole point of Tilt as a character was to play on those tropes, just because I think it's hilarious. For instance, one of the big tropes is superheroes changing their costumes too much. Well, in those first 3 issues, really the first 2 issues, we see him in 3 different suits. And it was literally just a thing I thought was funny, because it's a trope that we all know, and something that I could spin and play with. And then, he's a fourth wall breaker, so he talks to the audience. So that's a trope that's used in specific ways for specific characters. Deadpool, of course, is what comes to most people's mind when you say fourth wall breaking superhero. But Tilt does it in a little bit different of a way, I feel anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to play off of. He actually came out of a whole bunch of extra brainstorming notes that I had when I was writing Paradigm, and he just became a completely different character. And when I conceptualized him, I told the people that I was closest to, Tilt is the character that I've designed for people to fall in love with. And Paradigm's the character that I designed for people to realize about a year or 2 from now, oh crap, he was more essential than I thought he was. And so far, that's been working perfectly, because people love Tilt for whatever reason. The other trope we play off a lot is the beefcake aspect of it because it's hilarious and I think it's something that a lot of people think is super humorous. And I learned that from Tim Seeley, his run on Grayson and on Nightwing. That was one of his big things was mutual exploitation. And so when we did the Kickstarter for this third issue, I sent a picture of Tilt laying on the couch with his shirt off. I sent it to Tim Seeley, and I didn't say anything. I just sent him the picture, and he was like, "Dude, I'm all for mutual exploitation." And so we play off of that. And in fact, one of the rewards we did for this last Kickstarter was like the old school classic heart where you'd normally have mom written in it for a tattoo. Well, we did a temporary tattoo of the heart that Matt designed, and it says Tilt in it instead. And so we just shipped all those out to people. But he was, like you said, he was taken when he was a kid. He was a teenager. He was trained up to be a mercenary. So getting taken at that age, once he finally breaks out, which is 15, 16 years later, he still very much has that 15, 16-year-old mindset. So you can see that in some of his interactions with Cindy or talking with women. Like he's still very much a little bit nervous and trying to be cocky and overcompensating and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, and then I actually really like those interactions, and even the fact that like he goes and he sort of tracks down the person who took him, and he breaks his window, and even like that, and he does it again, and he says, "I'm
Well,
not too."
I just realized something about that, and I think it was something that was hidden in my subconscious from when I was a child. In fact, I just had this discussion with my wife like 2 nights ago. We were watching Home Alone. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and she wants to watch Home Alone every night now. And there's this one thing that they do in that movie. It's never talked about. It just happens every time someone drives up in the driveway. They hit that statue and knock it over, and there's always that little clip of them having to put the statue back. They never talk about it. It's just something that happens. And I think that was hidden in my subconscious because what I do with Tilt is every single time he goes to meet with Exquisite, he breaks through the window, never uses the door. And it's just, I don't know, it's stupid and humorous to me because he's making this dude pay for a new window every single time he goes to talk to him.
And my favorite element of that, that also shows his childhood in many ways, is that he says, "Oh, I'm not too concerned about it because I know you have money."
Yeah.
And I like how, because that's very much a childish thing in many ways, where, and so that to me also shows his child
Hmm.
position and the fact that he's this guy. He obviously has a beard. He obviously is muscular, and he knows he's an adult. I mean, he has to at this
Right.
point. But
Right.
also, he's like, "Oh, I'm not concerned because you have money, and money's not real to me." And he has no concept of money.
Yeah, and there's also that whole element of, well, Exquisite's the guy that took me when I was a kid. So, this is just something that I can do just to pester him, just to mess with him, which like you said, that's very much like that kid thing. I wanted Patrick to really have that kind of depth as a character where there's just about something in any bit of his personality that I think everyone can cling on to, depending on what side you're seeing as far as what's happening in the story. Because there are elements of the story that are very dark, and dealing with the council who he escaped from, that is for the Catalyst Comics superhero universe, those are the main bad guys. And so it's integrated into Paradigm, it's integrated into our short stories. It's something that's always been there, and you're just discovering it more directly with Tilt because he escaped there. But yeah.
Yeah, and to even talk about the dark side of stuff, because also the dark side in this, we get all those humor moments, and we get the fact that he's pestering him and all that stuff, and he also does the drop and fly routine with certain
Yes.
people, and obviously
Yep.
that's funny because how many times have we as DC comic fans wanted Superman to do that, and it's kind of funny in many ways, and he says, "Oh, I think let's get you a new pair of pants," in
Yeah.
there too. But to go to the dark side of things, and I think Exquisite says it amazingly where he's like, "I keep pieces on the chessboard to myself,"
Yes.
meaning that he has a connection to this council, and this
Mhm.
council obviously has a lot of shit going on with them. And I don't know the full extent. I don't know if it's been fully revealed, but we know that they're not the greatest people. They're obviously in the business of super soldiers. They're in the business of finding some type of cellular, serum, probably, I think, is a safe assumption. And, well, Exquisite is involved with them, but also the fact that he is now watching the game being played, and he also
Yeah.
says to somebody, I don't think Patrick can beat them, but I think he can do them damage, which means that
Right.
they have something on Exquisite, or that Exquisite can benefit and gain more power or more money from damage. And so
Yeah.
there's somewhat of a civil war occurring in many ways.
Yeah. Exquisite became, in my initial kind of scripting and stuff, he was just that side character. And then the more I kind of developed him and thought about how I wanted his character to play out, the more and more I felt like, okay, well, he's gonna have some kind of presence in every issue. Um, he's gonna be more of a world player. And if you notice, anytime he does talk, for the most part, there's going to be some hinting towards chess or some hinting towards playing a game, and it's very much his personality. It's what got him to where he is. And he's in that in between stage where he can play between the heroes and the villains, because if it benefits him, out of his mouth he says if it benefits him, then he'll play either side. How that reflects in his personal behind the scenes is something yet to be discovered. But he's a very strong character, and I think we've noticed a lot of people have been really behind Exquisite as a character, which is super encouraging to have a side character that people are really starting to like. And so we'll see more of him. I have a really cool plan for the future of his story as well.
And I think a lot of people like him because everybody can relate. Because the way I viewed it is that Exquisite is on Exquisite's side, and
Exactly.
we hear this entire thing, and I think Alicia Keys has a song "Underdog" where she mentions something about being on her own side. The only side is
Hmm.
I'm on my own, and it's a great song and it's a great lyric, and I think that describes Exquisite's position precisely. Not him being the underdog, but
Right.
obviously being on his own side and presenting forward, and I think that's something that I think is becoming more and more relevant in our society. And I
Yeah.
think he's very relatable where, people are now saying, hey, I'm out for myself. Which,
Yeah, and I designed him to be semi-reflective of Tilt. The first time that you see Exquisite show up, he's having that conversation with his assistant about helping her get through the medical issue that she has. Because one of his powers is that he can see what people's powers are. He can sense that, but that also means he can sense their deficiencies and issues with blood and all that kind of stuff. And so the first time we meet him in that first initial scene, we see that empathy that he has. Well, Tilt's the same way. He is an empathetic character, but both of them are strong, and both of them are strong in different ways. And so it's like you see Exquisite where he's strong and rich, and then you see Patrick where he's strong but homeless in the first issue. So I wanted to have that kind of reflection, and I think it's going to build more of a kinship between the two of them. If you read issue 3, so kind of the huge ending for that. Well, one of my favorite things is about to happen in issue 4, and it's simple because like after what happens at the end of issue 3, what would that next conversation between Patrick and Exquisite be like? And when I wrote that, I was like, oh, this is
yeah, let's. I don't want to sell too much of issue 3, but certain things happen, and I think I can say something that happened at the end of issue 2, and I don't think it's too much of a bomb. But Patrick sort of has a ghost from his past coming back, and I think it was mentioned at the end of issue 2, and I think I could drop it. It's
Yep.
not too much of a spoiler, but Talon, I think
Hmm.
is back, and so there's a history
Yes.
between those two. Obviously, Exquisite has to be somewhat involved in all this because I think Exquisite sort of let Patrick give him a heads up about it. I think that's how it read, and so obviously we sort of find out some history, and then an event happens with all of that, and it's very interesting where it goes, and it also speaks about the council, and it gives us even
Hmm.
more insight into them, and then how BS and a
Yeah.
variety of other stuff. And I'm avoiding what happens, but let's just say that it's a game changer. I think is a safe assumption. I don't even know the full extent of the game change, but obviously it's a pretty emotional blow is coming.
Yeah.
just to throw it out there. And I'm not going to say any more on that, but what can you tease, if anything? Because I know that issue 3 was just more or less sent out to
Yeah,
people.
it's just went out within the last couple of weeks.
So
So it'll
some
be
people might
dropping.
have read it at this point.
Yeah, we've had a few people read it. In fact, the Brett from Indie Comics Dispatch, he did a video reaction video to reading it. So it was basically just him crying and drinking. Um, so it was pretty great. But yeah, I mean it's just the way that the story progressed in my head. It was none of the one of the things I don't do when I script is forcefully edge stuff in there. It's more of a how do I see this story progressing? And so much of that issue is such a setup for what's going to happen after the story arc. Um, but you never realize. It's also one of those things where you never realize the weight of what you wrote until you get the page back from the artist, and then you get it back from the colorist, and then that particular page at the end, if you notice, there's no words on it. Originally in the script, I had words, and then I took it out and I sent because I always talk to our team before I make any changes, just so they know, and then we all review the book together. And I said, "This page spoke for itself. I don't even. There's no words that need to be said on this page." So I don't know. It's fun to explore these characters, and it's fun to kind of dictate where I think each of them can go. And what one of my biggest things is motivation. I think I try to teach that as much as I can when I talk to people about writing and creating stories is the biggest key that you need to answer is motivation. What drives each of these characters? Once you have that nailed down, then you just play in that world. And then you just throw in little wrenches every once in a while. And how are they going to react to it? It's the old thing that everybody says about Joker is the same thing where we're all one bad day away. It's that same kind of thing. What happens when we end up in front of an obstacle?
And then obviously I would ask about issue 4, but I don't think we really can talk about issue 4 because issue 3 leads right into issue 4.
Yeah.
By
Yeah, I mean,
definition,
it'll be the showdown that I think everybody's. Once you hit the end of issue 2, there's that ghost from his past, and then issue 3 deals with that a little bit more. Well, 4 is gonna be. In fact, I think it was. I was trying to count the other day, and it's like 16 pages of fighting between like Tilt and either the minions or Tilt and Talon themselves. Much of that book is the fighting, but as you know, I really enjoy dialogue and kind of driving into the story.
There's gonna be reveals. Is
Yes,
the
for sure.
point, and there's gonna be more history, and I think it's safe to say the saying is that I'm a big wrestling fan, so I'll put Talon and Tilt in the best way I can put them in, and I'm gonna take a stab at it. Stop me if I'm wrong. It's Shawn Michaels versus Triple H at Armageddon back in
Yeah.
like 2002. Is the best way in a
Yeah.
2 out of 3 falls type of
Yeah.
match.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, once you realize who they are to each other, it's like, well, okay, well, they might be a little bit more evenly matched than I thought. And one of them might be a little bit more psychotic than I thought. And how does that balance out? And what would this fight look like between these characters? And, issue 4 wraps up that story arc. So I had to make sure that I made it impactful, but I also gave them those moments, each of them for each character, because I wanted them to have those moments of. Uh, it's almost like the Joker movie that came out, last year, whenever it was. It had those moments where it's like, well, that's a good point, even if it's coming from a villain. It's like, oh, well, that's a pretty good point. Well, I wanted Talon to have that same kind of moment, and so he says stuff sometimes that's like, well, I mean, he has a point. So
And so to even go beyond all this, and this might ruin some stuff, and what is gonna happen after issue 4? Is there more to this story arc, or is the story arc 4 issues, and then we're gonna enter a whole new position, or does it break off into exquisite, or are there scene breaks where we're getting more of this universe? Because something tells me you have more of a universe approach at this
yeah,
point
yeah. For
versus
the Catalyst Comics universe stuff, I do. Welcome to Everville is completely separate. Anything that's under that Uprising title is going to be completely separate. But yeah, in Tilt's storyline, issue 4 is going to wrap up his story with Talon pretty much for now, because it's a comic book, so there's always that chance of I might see that character again or whatever. Because really, what's going on is the council, and so I want to be dealing with them as much as possible. The end of issue 4 is going to be a direct setup for the next story arc, which is going to be. I went through it with Matt. It's one of my favorite things to do is to sit down with Matt as the co-owner and be like, all right, here's where everything's going. And then just watch his face as I progress through a storyline. Because most of the time he's like, wait, how can you do that? And I'll just do it anyway. But so it's going to deal a lot more directly with the Council of Elders after during the next story arc. Paradigm, his story, he's discovering that there even is a Council of Elders. And then you'll find out that he's a little bit more tied to it than he thought he was. And so eventually Silhouette is going to get her own solo series, and she's like an assassin, Middle Eastern style. And her story is probably the darkest concept that I've had as far as a superhero concept. And that's when you'll really see the darkest side of the council, and you'll really realize how evil they are. And all 3 of those stories are leading up to the big crossover event. I have a map that I post on a lot of stuff, and basically it's 42 issues between these. There's 4 different stories, but 42 issues between all of them before the huge crossover event, which will probably be 3 comic books that are like extended, so larger issues. And then I have it planned for what happens afterward, which is basically the fallout of what happens to each character after this event. So everything is bubbling, everything's building up. And even within this stuff, I write prose as well. I have Fire by Night, which is a medieval story. It's set in 1117, but it's set in the Catalyst Comics universe. It's a character that has superpowers, and it's before you even really know anything about the council. So it's just a fun world for me to play in. While I'm waiting for artists to get work done, I get to sit here and just write prose stuff and develop that. So there's also, there's 2 short stories. There's that Fire by Night and then Silhouette Shadow Games, and all that's integrated into the superhero universe. So there's a lot of, for a studio that's as young as we are, publishing since March of last year, there's plenty of content to get people kind of into the Catalyst Comics universe. And then if they don't like superheroes, that's when we have like Welcome to Everville or like the books we're putting out next year. So there's always more stuff.
And so to even talk about book 4, because obviously book 3 or issue 3, I don't know how you phrase them, but I think they're more or less the same thing as far as continuity goes. When are you going to, because I have a feeling you're going to kickstart book 4 or issue 4 at this point, because that seems to be the norm now in many ways.
Yes. Yeah. For now, that's the same route that we take, which is much like everyone else. Our goal is to get to the point that we're not relying on Kickstarter for every single book. But we're still a young company, so right now it's more about making smart choices. Luckily, we're pretty decent with that. We're really good at the art of doing more with less. And so we have a lot of stuff that we'll be announcing at the beginning part of next year. And one of them is going to be, Tilt 4. The plan right now is for that to be our summer blockbuster for Kickstarter. And we have something that we're going to be doing that involves a lot of people before that involves Tilt. And it's going to be something that I think a lot of people will get really engaged with. And then we hope that'll kind of just flow into getting issue 4 done.
And now we're not going to push any further with Tilt. And we're going to talk about Kickstarter more towards the back end, because there's a million things. Again, Cyberpunk 2077. Oh, yeah. I'm just throwing it out there. I promise it's going to make sense. I promise. But let's talk about Welcome to Everville, because that is very different. And I thought it was going to go one way, and it went a completely different way. And I was actually...
that makes me feel so good when I hear that, because in my mind, that's how I wanted it to play out.
And I'm not a horror guy. I actually really do not like horror comics. It's just not my jam. I like big, bright fantasy colors, and I love like new school, like S colors and rich blended colors.
Yeah.
And I also don't like being scared. I really don't. Right. I'm not one of those people that like I get scared if like I'm listening to music and somebody just taps me on the shoulder, like I jump 15 feet up in the air. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, for sure.
So to talk about that, and I thought it was interesting, and I didn't view it as a horror comic either. So there we go. Clearly, I don't know my skills, and I'm just going to leave quietly now. But anyhow, the basic premise is that there's these meteors that contain vampire-esque aliens. I guess is a good way to put it, called Neverlings.
Yep.
And pretty much what winds up happening is that there's a guy named Abe Johnson. He lives in this small little village, town esque thing, very, very quiet, very rustic, and pretty much what winds up happening is that they land and then they kill three high schoolers. And then the government sort of covers it up and they're trying to figure out what's going on. But one of them is sort of the principal and trying to kill a kid. And then Abe discovers it, hears the screaming, and then his father saves him. And then that's kind of the basic premise of what's going
Yeah.
on. So
I love when people talk about it because it's like the whole last half of that book is all spoiler. So it's like, well, let me not say that.
well, I'm just gonna drop it. Okay, I think this has been out since October 10th,
Yeah.
so I think
But
it's fair
yeah, it's been a
game.
while.
It's fair game at this point to talk about it, in my view. And
Yeah,
so,
in fact, I've not even talked about it with anybody, like those moments or those twists or anything. So yeah, I'm all for it.
I also feel though that the first issue is just the setup for the rest of it. Like, I feel in many ways, and I read a lot of comics, that this is the type of thing that just sets it up. It's kind of like at the beginning of Avatar, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Yeah.
If that's the spoiler for you, I don't know what to say. Like,
Yeah.
but
Well, yeah. I mean, if you just look at the very last page, that's the moment where you're like, okay, well, there's a huge jump, and the sky is filled with meteors rather than the one that they were dealing with. So it's going to be a massive thing that happens in the next one. In fact, one of the things that, again, I haven't even really talked about this stuff since the book came out. Just kind of been letting it fester, and letting people get a hold of it. So far, most people that have read it really enjoyed it because, again, like you said, it wasn't what they were expecting. Because I'll be honest, I'm not a big horror fan at all. I like classic monsters, which is the whole premise that we had for creating the Neverling was, what can we do to get back to that feel of what classic monsters were like, Creature from the Black Lagoon and things like that. I am not a slasher guy at all. So even those moments in that book that are, more horror-esque, eating entrails and stuff like that, or the tree page with all the body parts hanging on the tree, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not even that big into horror. It more came out of a question of what would I do if I wrote a dark fantasy story, because that's really where the story is, and that's the vein I'm trying to go for, is dark fantasy. And as when you find out who the characters really are, that they're part of the Helsing bloodline, that's when you realize, okay, well, this is a lot more in the fantasy vein than just the horror vein.
yeah, and I also think that, like, the way I described it is that this is almost like a prequel, where
It is. It's very much like a zero issue. In fact,
yeah,
what people are going to notice is when we launch issue 2, I'll call it issue 2. It's not called Welcome to Everville. It's really the next chapter of that story. So it has a different name. It still has Everville in the title, but it's not called Welcome to Everville.
and I also like the fact, and I'm gonna spoil some stuff, where
Oh yeah, go
the
ahead.
creature they're dealing with is a scout.
Yes.
And as people know, and I don't mean to ruin anything, but a scout, typically in army terms, is somebody who scouts the position. Is sort of the person who's not the major frontline fighter, and the creatures they're dealing with and Earth is dealing with, because it's not just in Everville, this
Yeah.
problem, which I also think is cool too, because it's a global problem. But I'm feeling we're going to deal with this on more of a local level in many ways, which is cool because I like the idea that there's other things happening, but we're only dealing with a very small subsection, and
Right.
so they have some trouble dealing with just a scout, and that I think highlights and elevates, like, holy shit, now we're having a whole armada coming in. And not to mention that it's a meteorite landing, and you're gonna have a bunch of meteors landing on Earth, and then these creatures are also gonna land too. It's like you got really two problems here. Like,
Yeah. Well, the inspiration behind it, would be, again, I'm not a horror fan, so I don't even watch The Walking Dead. I don't read The Walking Dead. I know the storyline enough to know that it was a good idea to make a story family centric. And so I was like, okay, well, let me make it family centric, but also let me make it about this little town called Everville, and how they would react to this particular thing. And then the end game goal is every single issue. I want that world that we started building to get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and lead it up to, it's only slated for 6 issues. They're all outlined. It's more of a matter of just getting the time to put them all out. But again, the scope, it just gets a little bit bigger each time. And I I don't consider myself some fantastic writer or anything by any means. I just love what I'm doing, and I love being able to create these little worlds and these little moments. And you never even really understand it until you put the book out and you hear feedback, because things that you wouldn't expect to hear from people, like one of them was, please give those three scientists their own little spin-off story that are in the beginning of Welcome to Everville. So there was that, and then somebody else was like, my favorite character in this whole story was the dad, Cecil. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool, because I designed him for a specific purpose, to see that hard side of him at the beginning, but then start seeing a little bit more of a humorous side. And then going forward, when you see him enter into issue 2, it's a hilarious moment in a horror kind of way. And it's just because this is fun for me. These are the stories that I want to tell. I'm not just doing this for fan service. In fact, we created these monsters. We had to create a whole new race of monsters for this, and it's just fun for me to get to tell these stories. So I appreciate it when people connect with something, even in, like, being able to enjoy it and not being a horror fan. For me, I'm the same way. I don't like horror. I don't like reading horror comics. I don't watch horror movies. If I do, I'm more on the psychological thriller side. So I like those twists too, as you could probably guess from the way I write Tilt and the way I write Welcome to Everville. I like those little moments when it's like, oh crap.
So I'm going to give you your tagline to put on the back of issue 2 right now. This is The Walking Dead meets Stranger Things meets Robotech, Southern Cross, and Next Generation.
Oh god, it's a long time.
It's that's what it is. That's exactly what this is in many ways.
Well, one of the Walking Dead, the idea of that story is one of the inspirations. If you know the story of how he put out that book, he told Image that it was a story about an alien invasion, and then it got
an alien invasion. Jim
issues.
Shooter was the editor. Eric Stefferson was doing it, and then there's a debate whether issue 1 got published or issue 2 is coming, and they're like, when are the aliens coming? Because at the time that it was coming out, Aliens were really big with Dark Horse and IDW.
Yep.
And what wound up happening is that,
he just lied.
and Kirkman really only thought he was only going to get 6 issues out of it. And it's a whole thing. And I talk about this extinct. If anybody's ever seen my work, they know I tell this story.
It's a very cool story and very humorous in the sense of, like, I know I would probably do the same thing if I was in his position. I would just be like, oh yeah, you want an alien story? Sure. And then just not put an alien in it. I think that was genius. I mean, well, look at what became of it. Whether you like it or not, who cares? Look at what became of it, So that the way he told the story, at least toward the beginning of what I know of it, was that it was the idea of a focused family group and telling that story in a little group of survivors. And so it was that same element. And then another huge inspiration show that most people don't remember, which is called Falling Skies. That was one of my absolute favorite sci-fi shows. I own all 5 seasons. I watched them at least once a year. Noah Wiley was great.
The graphic novels
there are
were good.
Elements from that I'm playing off of in the story as well.
With the Falling Sky graphic novels,
absolutely.
They were phenomenal. They did such a good job with that show.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. And then I would imagine that I don't know if you've seen Colony, but Colony is also very similar.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But enough about other things. And you mentioned something else about that too, where I really enjoyed the dad. So I'm a big fan of fatherhood. Obviously, I don't have kids yet. I can't wait to have children. It's going to be a blast to have them. But one of the things
It
that I
is.
think happens, and I don't mean to get too political, but fatherhood in America in probably the last 20 years has not been treated greatly. And I think there's a big pushback. I was traveling to Maryland maybe about a year and a half ago, and there was a billboard that said, Papa Smurf, be a papa. On traveling to Maryland and traveling south to Maryland and about 60 miles outside of DC. So
Mm.
obviously you're going, more south. And we get him, being on somewhat disability or workers' comp, sort of being drinking and being an asshole dad in many ways.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, when his kid is in danger, and this stuff says, he said, if you come home right now, and he's sort of scolding his kid, and then eventually he sort of comes to save his kid in many ways, and he tells, Abe to get the hell out of there. And it's a very interesting position because I interpreted that as, well, he's being a hard ass on his kid, but he still loves his kid. And I thought that he was just gonna be like a drunk, bastard father.
Yeah, it's very much that's very much what it was. It's when push comes to shove, and because you have that moment, because I've had people ask me the question of, well, in fact, I ended up having to write it into the story because I wanted to make sure it was abundantly clear, because I had it kind of in there and then I decided to go back and re-dialogue it. But when he was like, if you knew that this thing was here, why would you send me back to the school? And Cecil's like, well, I had no idea where this thing was. And so once he realizes that Abe's in the school with this thing, that's when you really see that fatherhood come out. He's been a jerk this entire story, but when push comes to shove and there's a threat on your child, things change. And then look what happens in the story where, Abe's the one that ends up taking down the Neverling, and his father, is all of a sudden super proud of his son and realizes that there's something deeper here. And then we get to see that grow in future stories as well. Well, even just the time jump at the end, you see all three of them standing together, older, wiser, new clothes, well, old clothes, but stuff's happening.
Yeah, and there's a 4-year jump, so
Yes.
obviously there's gonna have to be some back history, some forward history, and some stuff's
Yeah.
gonna happen, and we're gonna sort of explore that over the next 5 issues. And
Yep.
we're gonna get some Section 89, from my understanding, coming down the line. So who knows? Maybe there's gonna be men in black suits for all I know.
Well, it's a 4-year time gap, so it's I will say um, that, like I said, I like growing that global scope of a story. But I'll say the beginning of the next issue, you're going to realize that a lot's happened in 4 years, and that it's not the same. It's not the same Everville, and it's not the same world, and so we get to play off of that, and I really look forward to that because, like you said, this very much feels like a premiere, like a early issue, and it was very much written like a zero issue. In fact, the original idea I had for it was called Detention, which, as you know, most of it takes place in a school. And it was going to be a story around some kids dealing with this Neverling, and that completely got revamped into this whole family centric. And then after the 6 issues, there's a whole prequel story that I want to tell that is a completely different. Well, I mean, even reading Welcome to Everville, it's a completely different spin on the Van Helsing story, and so I want to play off of that after this story's wrapped up after 6 issues.
Well, I don't know if you know my back history and who's been on my show and all that fun stuff, but I have a connection with Zenoscope, which is
Okay.
basically, and Ralph Tedesco, who is one of the co-owners and founders of Zenoscope, they did the Van Helsing series, and that's their
Hmm.
concept for sci-fi. So I'm a big Van Helsing fan and what they've
Yeah.
done with all that stuff. So I
Yeah,
know
and
so
I mean
much
that's
about this.
but that was one of those big things where it's like, let me hint it right at the beginning. The kid's name's Abe, and then and then you see it later on where it's okay. Well, this is Abe Helsing instead of Abe Johnson, and even like the sword. We're going to see it play a little bit more on the fantasy side. There's still going to be those horror elements for people that need to see things heads get chopped off and stuff. Um, and then, like I said, after that, I want to go back and do the prequel story, because I feel like this is something so different for a Helsing idea and a Helsing story. And I've been through the prequel storyline with my co-owner, and he was like, "Dude, no one's told this particular story. Like that's what we need to focus in on. So I look forward to doing that. That'll probably be just like a 3 or 4 issue little short story. But I look forward to getting to that point too, whenever we do, you know?
And now let's change gears and let's talk about Kickstarter because I don't know if
Yeah.
Everville was funded on Kickstarter. I
Yep.
think it was, right?
Yes, it was.
And so obviously you funded, I think, a bunch of projects on Kickstarter, and you're probably
Yeah.
going to be doing
Tilt
that.
3 was our fourth project. The only one that's been published that we didn't fund was Tilt number 1.
And so obviously you have experience with Kickstarter, and you're a new company, and obviously that horrific experience with your first one, which typically, a lot of people have a rough time with their first Kickstarter,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially dating backwards, 5 years
Yes.
ago or 4 years ago or 3 years ago even. Now I think a lot more people, there's a lot more resources. Obviously there's comics tribes and Tyler James's entire group and comics launch and all that stuff. That's been super
Yep.
helpful for a lot of people. There's also
Yeah.
just a lot more information out there. You can go on YouTube and get a really quick idea of Kickstarter in 2020 at this point. But just to even talk about that, like what was going on with that first Kickstarter? Because I think it's super important that people understand it and know what happened. And you don't have to get too much into the weeds per se, unless you want to go down that route. But
I'll do
what
it.
what was that
Like I
like?
said, the Beards and Comics podcast, we talk about all of this stuff because we want people to know that behind the scenes what it's really like, especially doing your when you're getting into this stuff. And luckily, we've seen success stories branch off of people listening to that. We just had one of our guys that's been listening since the beginning. He did his first ever campaign for his first ever comic book, and he did like 4,500 or something, which is for a first issue. That's insane. Um, it's when you're coming in here, nobody knows you. Well, to go back in our story, Paradigm One, uh, like I said, Matt and I met and we did that story. It was his first book, my first book, so nobody knew us, and that's something you don't even realize really until you hit that launch Kickstarter button. When you hit that is when you realize, oh yeah, nobody knows us. And if you don't have a super supportive family, then like for us, our families disappeared all of a sudden when we hit launch, and brothers, everything. They just like, where'd you guys all go? I guess they're hiding for 30 days or whatever. Um, but so we launched. We set it up. We thought we had kind of nailed down what we thought we could get. Of course, we were overzealous. We had our first campaign set for $4,500 goal, which, as people know that do launch, that's stupid for your first goal.
Stupid
If
even for
nobody
your
knows you.
second
If
goal.
you've already, yeah, I mean, it's even now we would never do that until we're at a completely different place in our career.
Even
Um,
still, I'm gonna say from my experience, and after 90 of these, and then another like 20 on my other show, the psychology of high goals is really not great. There's been a huge movement away from that.
yeah, yeah, and understandably, it is. First off, it was the most stressful month of my adult life, and I have a 3-year-old. But it was absolute. I mean, like I felt sick almost every day. By the end of that campaign, we only had 34 backers. But what happened with us, not everybody gets this lucky, but what happened with us is somebody came to us. I think we had a week, and they said, "Look, I want to actually invest and get your company started. So get whatever you can get, and then just don't worry about it. I'll fill in the gap for the rest." So then my last week was stressed around the idea of I don't want this person to have to give us a bunch of money, and things played out the way they did. This person came through at the end and finished it off, and we didn't have to self fund. That's a big thing for me. I don't like it. I know some people do it. You're not supposed to. It says it on the website, but some people do it. I am not a fan of it. I think it's disingenuous. But anyway, we lucked out with that person that said, "Look, just get whatever you can get, and we'll make sure that this is a successful campaign." So thankful for them, thankful for that. We've never had to have that again, because after that, it kind of put that fire under us. Where we're like, we got to make sure that we build on this, and we got to make sure that this money that we do have not only gets us this book, but it gets this company really going. And so that's when we started. We did a few cons in 2019 and had a good response. It's interesting now because we went to cons in 2019, which was one book almost the entire year, and then Tilt One came out. So the last couple of cons that we did in 2019, we had Tilt One. So that first campaign launched Paradigm, and then we hired Joe and paid for Tilt One. So we didn't kickstart Tilt One, but we kind of did that thing where you reach out to people and you just see who it connects with, and we found a store in Florence, South Carolina, which is about 2.5 hours from where we live, and they liked the idea of Tilt, so they bought 100. No, they bought 50 of just a store variant. Then our local shop here, they bought 20 of their store variant, and so we started kind of dealing with these stores. Well, that store in Florence has bought their own variant for Tilt 1, 2, and 3, and they already told us what they want for 4. Well, they did 50 for Tilt 1. Then they did 150 for Tilt 2, and then they just did 150 for Tilt 3. And they went back and they said, well, I want 100 more of Tilt 1s for our store because that way I had 150 of each of them. And so those are huge moments for us, for being a little company. When you find a store that's is willing to get so invested, it's super encouraging. But then we launched Tilt 2. So this might be something for a lot of people to know, because it's something we're still learning and something we still do, even though it's not the best thing you can do. Superhero books on Kickstarter are very difficult. It is not a really, really good market for superhero books.
Yeah.
In all honesty, it might be unpopular to say, but it looks like superhero books do way better on Indiegogo. Even ones that are not great quality seem to get $5,000-$6,000.
I also think,
and we still do.
Yeah, just to talk about that, I also think though that, and I'm curious your opinion about this, where I think people who go to Kickstarter and go to Indiegogo and go elsewhere, because I don't know there's a few others, but they're significantly smaller. I don't think
Right.
if you go to Kickstarter, you're looking for a superhero book. Like, I have no desire when I'm looking to back something on Kickstarter. I'm looking for something out of the woodwork. I'm looking for something that's not a DC Marvel book. And look, I love Green Lantern. I'm not bashing any superhero things or anything like that. But I'm way more interested in something that's like, oh, this could never happen with a DC or a Marvel, or even an Image doesn't want to take that bet, or the person can't do it on Image because you get into debt on Image with that book, and they take, before your issue gets sold, you're in debt to them, and then if you do 30,000 copies, you're great, and you're out of debt indefinitely, but you're also taking that risk.
And chances are you have 20,000 copies sitting in a room somewhere in your house. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Catalyst Comics do publisher, and there's a reason that Matt and I, neither of us desire to work for one of the bigger companies. There's of course that caveat where if someone from DC or Marvel came to me and they came to me on my terms, then yeah, I'll talk. I mean, who wouldn't want to have, like, yeah, I wrote an issue of Spider-Man or whatever. Who wouldn't want to have that under their
you
resume?
Would take if Marvel
whether you like the companies
up.
or not. But at the end of the day, that's not why I make comics. That's not my goal. And a lot of our friends, that is their goal, is they want to get in with these companies. And that's great. I mean, hopefully things get better with these companies and we can see better stories, and maybe they need these new writers. But for me, publishing my own stuff is just the way we want to do it, and gradually growing our company, taking those steps. What we've been realizing over the last couple of years is, A, just put in the effort. B, be willing to put money where your mouth is. And C, just be willing to try things. And once we started doing that, we realized there is a market here. People do want to hear what we have to say. People do want to read our books. And as that grows, we'll keep growing the company also. But yeah, I mean, like you just said, Kickstarter is really a place, because even going back and thinking about the things that I back on Kickstarter, most of those books are the weird books. They're like you said, stuff you're never going to see in any of the big companies. And then the flip side is superhero stuff does do good on Indiegogo. We've yet to even attempt to do an Indiegogo. I think we're planning on maybe for the trade of Tilt, but for now we have that base on Kickstarter, so it'd be dumb to abandon them. And we want to make sure that we give them the option for issue 4 as well, so they can get that full story arc. But we did do Welcome to Everville on Kickstarter as well, and that's when we got a little bit smarter. We're like, okay, well, Matt and I did this book, so we're not paying ourselves off of this. We'd rather take that money, get the book printed, and invest it in the next Tilt or whatever. So we did a $500 goal, knocked it out in like 33 hours or something like that, and ended it doing like 3,300, which is better than we've done on Tilt 2 and Tilt 3.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that
ahead.
because that's something that I've been seeing a lot more, where there's been a lot lower goals, at least for first issues, second issues, and sometimes on a third issue that goes a little bit higher, especially if you know that you have the fan base or your Facebook page has grown significantly, where you have like 30,000 Facebook fans. Obviously, if you throw that out on your Facebook, you're fishing in a bigger pond in many ways. Yeah. But for the most part, even with other bigger issues now, I've seen people do like 500 goals, and I know for a fact that the $500 isn't going to cover their printing or all of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Getting a good chunk of it. But what's happening, and I'm curious on the psychology, where do you feel that because it's funded so quickly, people then say, oh man, it's already back now, my risk tolerance of it failing is not so bad anymore, and now there's more push. And also the algorithm of Kickstarter, when a project gets funded or it gets funded in 45 minutes, there's a big hoo-ha moment to it. Yesterday I had Jamie Tyndall on. Miss Meow funded in 45 minutes on a $5,000 goal. That says, oh man, I got to get in on it. As a backer, I'm like, oh snap, this thing is moving. And we got 29 and a half days left. Oh snap, right? Yeah. Like there's forward momentum.
Yeah, I mean, so it's an ongoing learning lesson because we've never done the same goal amount twice. 4,500 we knew was stupid for our first one, and we don't plan to do that again unless something crazy drastic changes. 500, or what do we do for Tilt 2? Tilt 2 was 2,000, and that one struggle bust. And the reason that one struggle bust is because Tilt 1 we didn't put on Kickstarter, so it was like having to reintroduce a number 1 to new people, and that's a little bit harder when you do an issue 2. It's a little bit easier when you have more issues already, and then you can be like, oh, we'll get the whole collection. So we did realize doing Tilt 3 we did a $1,500 goal, and our original plan was to do a $1,000 goal. And like I said, we're really good at doing more with less. Of course, $1,000 when you're hiring artists and stuff, that doesn't cover the cost of it. It's just enough to get 1,000. I've pretty much got it to the math of where 1,500 can get us our rewards and our printing done. I very much encourage people, research the crap out of your rewards and see if you can get a better price somewhere else. Any of these big companies, especially like stickers and stuff like that. I mean, for God's sake, just use stickerguy.com. They've been around since the 90s. All of us that used to play in punk rock bands, that's who we got our stupid stickers through. They're still a fine company. You don't need to go to, Sticker Mule and pay 3 or 4 times that price for basic stickers. And I try to tell people this stuff, and just shop around when you're looking to fulfill these rewards, and you can get that price down, which means you have more. Either if it's more in your pocket, or for us, it's more in the company's pocket to where we can do more. And then shop around for books too. We print through Comic Impressions now out of Florida, and I couldn't be happier. I could not be happier with the price and with the quality of the books. We've printed through 3 days, and this is the first time that I've been like, we'll go back to these guys. And we have, Tilt 3 and then Welcome to Everville, both printed through them. So I try to encourage people to do that. There's a trick that I don't know exactly what it is, because finding what goal you feel like is right for your campaign is one of the most difficult things about doing the campaign.
Yeah.
We had it set for 1,000 in our heads, and we talked to somebody someone you probably know, and they're like, no, do 1,500. Well, if we had done 1,000, we would have funded overnight. In fact, we would have funded in the first couple of hours, which 1,000 in the first couple of hours for a book is pretty good. But then we didn't. We did 12. I want to say we did about 1,200 overnight, so we're still short of that 1,500. So then I was like, oh my god, how long is it going to take just to get this last 200? However, just to hit that funding goal. And in the end, we did 2,500. We did things a little bit smarter this time, where we did a lot more lives. We got the artist involved with the lives, and now he's obsessed with doing them. And then at the very, I think we had 2,100 with about 30 minutes left, and we had this crazy idea that Joe DeSantos, the artist for Tilt, he said and was willing to get an actual Tilt tattoo if we hit 2,500. And so then the chaos began, and people like started upping their pledges and jumping on because they're like, this dude's going to get an actual tattoo. But for Matt and I, that's super humbling because the dude doesn't get tattoos for stuff. He just doesn't have them. But for him to take our book that he is passionate about as well, for somebody that's not a co-owner or anything, for just an artist to be that passionate and be willing to do that, that's super humbling for us, and it makes us feel like maybe we're doing something right. So yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that whole let me figure out what the right price is. It's hard to get it right. It really is.
I know all about it. For those who don't know, I'm right now building a class, and I'm not going to get too much into detail, but believe me, and I'm doing it by myself, and I've asked a lot of people's opinions, and I sort of am sticking to what I think and my feeling on it, and it's going to be an experiment, and it's going to be fascinating, and I'm launching in March, end of March, early April, and it's going to be interesting. I think I'm right, but I could very well be wrong. And so I know all about it, but I've gone back and forth. Other people have given me
Yeah.
advice, and people who I trust and people who I think have my best interest, which is something that unfortunately I hate to say it, but there are people in the Kickstarter community who don't have people's best interests.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of how to say this in a. Okay. So
There
as I
are
said, we've
people.
only
There are
been.
people. I'll make this perfectly clear. There are people like Chuck Pinu, and I could say this openly,
Mhm.
who has a lot of people's best interest, in which that Chuck has. If you have Chuck as your editor or Chuck is advising for you, he has your best interest. And I say
Or
that,
Chuck just likes you.
or yeah, or Chuck just likes you. Chuck has
Yeah.
people's best interest,
Well,
but
he's very much that way with us. Where he doesn't edit our books or anything, but he likes us as people. He likes our podcast and stuff. So, he's supportive of it, and we couldn't be more grateful for it. But like you said, there is that other side too, and especially new people, you're going to find that. What we realized was, publishing since March of 2019, we're still relatively the new guys when it comes to being an actual publishing house. And so now people are starting to take it a little more seriously when they realize the moves that we've been making, and I think they'll see it a little bit more in January when we announce some more stuff. But what's most people will find happen. It's unfortunate, but you have to find the right group of people, and sometimes you got to do it by going through the fire. Is you'll notice a lot of people were there at the beginning that were like, come along, little puppy, I'll help you, I'll help show you the path. And then once you start doing okay or starting to get your own footing, then all of a sudden, where did those people go, or why are they so shady now? And I can't even say it's just a jealousy or an envious thing, because God knows I don't know why anyone would be envious or just of anything that we're doing. Our motto is do better, be better. We want to see people level up. We want to see people take things seriously and put their best foot forward. And for some reason, they'll certain people. I'm not saying all people. There's a very good group of indie comics creators, but there are those people that are like, well, no, if you don't need my help anymore, then screw you. And it's unfortunate, but it does exist.
it's the same in the podcasting world, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Is that there are guests who will not speak to me for a variety of reasons, and it cuts across a lot of positions. And it's not just because of where I'm at right now. It's not that I've done 200 plus interviews in 5 years. It's political, it's ideological, theological. It's religion is a part of it in some degree. It's where I'm at, and it's also the fact that I'm doing okay on this, and they
Yeah,
won't even answer my emails. They won't say hi to me, and I've come to the conclusion that what you find is that some people aren't as nice as they seem, and other people are the
yeah, for
nicest
sure.
people ever, and
And
clearly they just whatever.
for us, one of the things that we're pretty open about now is it took us a while to get to this point because a lot of people know Matt and I as the good guys in comics, the good guys on podcasts, and Matt and I do fall on different sides as far as political ideology, and we have differences in all kinds of stuff, but we work well together because A, we're not actively trying to change each other's minds, and B, when you listen to our stuff, you don't hear us uh, try to preach any points about anything, whether regardless of what side it is. In fact, we were joking around about it last night. Is I realized there's probably a whole lot of people that assume that I think one particular way because if they know who I am as off podcasts and stuff, then they're going to just assume that I fall in this one category. But if you don't ask me, then you can think whatever you want. But anyway, the point that we had to get to was for these people that are like that, like you just described. I'm willing and open to admit now we're going to remember that.
Oh, I remember
Before
everything. I
it
have a
was like,
list.
oh, I want to be everyone's friend. But we got to the point now where we're like, no, it's time where, if we want to treat this thing as a legitimate business, this is not all fun and games. It's not. We enjoy the heck out of it. I love creating comic books. That's my joy. That's my passion. But this other stuff and this little animosity that some people put forth, the fakery that some people put forth, we're noting all this stuff from here on out, and we'll be there when you need us if something crazy happens. But other than that, like there's certain people I'm not dealing with anymore. There's certain shows that I've been on that after I got off the show, I was like, nope, never again, never again.
So I'm very open. There is a certain group, and there's a certain number, and there are certain people that I have declared a war on, and I know that it's off-putting to certain people, and more people, and I've done it publicly. I've done it publicly with a bunch of guests, and I'm not here to pretend what I am. And it's not even a political war. It's that there are certain groups that have been overly privileged at conventions, and I have declared a war on them. And a bunch of people, and I've also uplifted people who deserve opportunities continuously, and I don't pretend anymore. And so if that pisses off people who have 500,000 followers on Instagram, so be it. Um,
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, even though I like some of you people who've been on my show, and there's no hatred to you as an individual, there is a problem with your group. But that's
yeah,
something that I've discovered, and if that puts people off, I'm willing to accept those consequences. I've come to a conclusion after 9 months of doing this, everybody, that that's where I'm at, and a lot of people privately have shot me messages in support, and I think I'm going to come out the other side looking cleaner than the Pope. But I just, besides that,
yeah. I mean, dude, my entire thing is, look, I'm not trying to change who you are. As long as you don't try to change who I am, then I don't care. As long as you don't talk crazy mess when we're doing a live stream or whatever. Like, there's been some shows that a couple now that I've been on, and they get into controversial stuff. I don't care what side you fall on it. It does that side doesn't matter to me. Just bringing it up in general with guests on your show, just I don't understand why anyone would do that because it makes this really awkward moment where the host says something because they know their audience, and then the guests are like, "Well, this is terrifying," and no one knows what to say now.
well,
and
well, 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 my
I
positions.
hate that.
Well, my positions for clarification are not controversial because more people agree with me, and I'm not spouting anything crazy. I'm spouting a very rational fact.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I was being fairly specific. There's, if anyone who's been watching Catalyst on stuff, then they can probably tell those couple of shows that we were on that you could just tell we were uncomfortable. And even if it's sometimes I'll be on the show and they'll say something that I agree with, but it's like, dude, at some point it's like, dude, you're a public facing figure. whether you want to admit it or not, if you're trying to treat this as a business, then you're a public facing figure. Like, I don't know, maybe not just say that.
So,
Or
so
maybe
to
not
talk
do it
about
for the shock value.
so to talk about controversy, and I've been teasing it all night, and it's not that controversial,
Oh,
but obviously Cyberpunk 2077 is out, and one of the big things that happened this year is Keanu Reeves came into Kickstarter.
right.
And I think along with Scott Snyder and Charles Soule, Ryan Brown's been around forever, and I think it's a good thing for Kickstarter. And I think it's great because I think it adds verification to Kickstarter. And I don't think we're going into controversy when I talk about this. So I am curious what your opinion is on that because I think it's a good thing for Kickstarter in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, when I say, when it comes to the creative side of stuff, I don't care if what I say is controversial or not because I know, man, I say things that people are like, well, I don't have that same view. Like, dude, we talk about like how we dislike Facebook and using Facebook for comic book pitching and stuff like that. I mean, I'm pretty open about it, and it's just because it's where we are now and the things that we're seeing, the trends that we're seeing. But yeah, when it comes to this stuff, I think Scott Snyder trying to do a Kickstarter was slightly funny to me because I thought he would have done a lot better. So it made me giggle that he didn't do better than he did. I'm nothing against the guy. I mean, he's Scott Snyder, but still slightly hilarious that it wasn't as big as most people would assume. And I promise not as big as Scott Snyder thought it would be. And then seeing Keanu Reeves come on, I mean, I just want him to say comics are cool for one of my videos. Just give me a 2.5 second clip saying comics are cool. Maybe we can clear $100,000 on a book. But yeah, I think it's beneficial because it's one of those things where Kickstarter is becoming its own social network in a sense. And basically, when you back something, if you have your notifications turned on, which anyone listening to this, if you're new to Kickstarter, make sure when you're on Kickstarter and you have your account, you have your notifications clicked on because anytime somebody backs your project, all of their followers get a notification. And anytime you back someone's project, all your followers get a. It's just nice. It's a polite thing to do because then you can see what other people are backing. So for people like Kiana to get on there and for that campaign to blow up, brought a lot of new people on Kickstarter. And that's one of the things that's encouraging for us is every campaign we've done so far, we've seen a lot of people come on as first-time backers. And so it shows us that there is at least some market there. The reality of the situation is, and this is where we'll get controversial with stuff because people don't like it when we say it. The reality of the situation is, let's say you had 4,000 backers, and let's say you did $500,000. A lot of money. That's not a lot of books. And I don't even remember what Berserker did. I'm just giving an allegorical story.
Did 800 something, 800,000 and something.
Yeah. And I don't even remember how many.
And rightfully so. It deserved what it got in many ways.
Yeah, for sure, and for sure. But the real thing that people are going to have to start thinking about going forward is first off, nothing lasts forever. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you never know what's going to happen legislative wise. The more that they start taking on big tech, who knows? Also, pay your taxes when you do a Kickstarter because I know some of y'all creators out there. Let me get in the camera. I know some of y'all creators out there.
I'll drop a creator that's not on Kickstarter that is well known for a tax issue, Peter David.
Oh, right.
That's not a name that people throw out, and that's a big name. And if you don't believe me, look it up. It's a big issue, and nothing against Peter David, but that's something.
Well, there's a few things that we, and this is coming from me as a publisher. There's a few things that we need people to step up on, and that's one, completing your projects, because you're making all of us look really bad when you do a project. And in fact, there's one that when we did Paradigm #1, there was a project that I backed. I still don't have that in my hands. It was a graphic novel. I'm not going to name drop, but they know who they are, and they know that it's been we're going into the 3rd year now, and that book's still not out because it's one of those situations. You hire an artist who's a good artist, and they get picked up by somebody else to do runs on other stuff. So
there's two types of artists,
under the bus.
Right? There's two types of people on Kickstarter. So I want to clarify this. There is people who are professionals who worked for DC or Marvel, and then they get fired from a book because they can't meet their deadlines, and then they get onto Kickstarter,
Yep.
but then they get rehired, and then they get onto Kickstarter, and then there's people
Yep.
like Chuck Dixon. Chuck Dixon is
Hmm.
involved in a project almost every single month, and he's not necessarily spearheading the project, but those books get delivered, and it might take 4 months or 6 months, but you know you're getting your book because Chuck Dixon is a professional.
Yeah,
So
I see.
two
I'm all for
types.
it because looking at the way that our publishing's progressing, we know that there's going to be that time where we want to start publishing other people's books. Well, how are we going to do that? We're going to have to help them funding wise. So that means there will have to be a point where we have multiple projects going on with the name Catalyst somehow related to it. If people know our brand, they know we've only had one book that has been delayed, and it was only by like 3 or 4 weeks. And they also know that it drove me nuts, and I posted an update almost every day because it I have OCD, and that kind of stuff drives me, like, I get super anxious.
It's
But all
for
of our other
me.
books, like Welcome to Everville, came out the month after we funded. And Tilt 3, we just shipped that out, and that's, we said December, boom, it's December.
So I'll drop and
But yeah,
just
that was
comment
my thing
on.
from a publisher. Please fulfill your projects because you're making the rest of us look bad. Also, for guys that back out your pledges, hey, if we shoot you a message and just check on you to make sure you're okay, it's not offensive. First off, yeah, we want your money. This is a business. But secondly, most of us are willing to work stuff out.
And also, look, sometimes people back out of pledges and something happened, and they're in a
Yeah.
nightmare situation. And I'm assuming you're not an asshole where somebody was like, "Yo, my kid just killed themselves. I really can't
Yeah.
deal with this." You're gonna
Well, see,
back
that's the
off a
thing though,
little
is
bit, right?
I would like to hear why, because it helps us in the long run as a publisher. It helps us understand if there's a reason that you backed out or if it was extenuating circumstances. Because we do like to kind of keep track of that stuff just so we know, okay, is it something that we did? And if there is it something that we need to address, or, it just helps us in the long run. So I think people, if you back out, that's fine. Oh, the other thing for international creators, do not ever say that you would back somebody only if they offered international shipping. Because first off, shipping to the UK is like $30 right now for a single comic book. That's absolutely absurd. If you want to pay it, great. But I've talked to creators who have said they've had international creators back their stuff, then back their pledges out and say, I'm not going to pay that in shipping. Well, guess what? Buy digital. I hate to be that guy, but it shows at least a little bit of support, and maybe wait until the trade and then buy the whole physical trade. But it helps the creators. It helps you look better because you're getting involved with more people. Because a lot of creators, as you guys will learn if you're new to this whole thing, it's very much, we call it buying each other lunch. And it's very much when someone starts a Kickstarter, you back them, even if it's a dollar pledge. And it's for the reason I said earlier. If you do a dollar pledge, all of your followers get a notification that you just backed this person's project. So it helps in the long run. And then if it's a book you really like or think you would like, then yeah, up your pledge and actually get the book.
So I'm probably the worst at this because I back 12 to 14 projects a year, and that's it. And so if you once I hit 12 or 14 between that number, I'm done. And it doesn't matter how good your book is. It's I have a budget and I stick to my budget, and that's the end of the discussion.
Yeah,
And
so we've been having this discussion a lot. We have enough friends. I mean, the more you do this, as you meet all these people, and we're finally at the point where we're going to start getting a little more selective. A lot of these people, I've read their stuff now, and I either know if I really do care to read more from them or if I don't. And look, that doesn't mean they're a bad writer. Like I said earlier, I don't think I'm anything special. If people click with my stuff, I couldn't be happier about it. But there's certain people I do click with their stuff, and there's other people that other people do click with that I don't. And that's okay. You don't have to like everything, and you don't have to back everything. For me, it's more of our studio, if we're going to back stuff, Going forward, it's going to be more of a, okay, well, let me get like a prepaid Visa debit card, and I'm going to put a certain amount of money on here. When that money's gone, we're done. Um, and
So
then do
for
some more dollar
me,
pledges, because that's the easiest way to do,
yeah.
is just a dollar pledge. But if it's a book you think you might actually like, then yeah, go for it.
So for me, I'm probably the worst because I am both an investor and a collector, and I view Kickstarter as a collecting position for me. And there's
Yeah.
certain cover
Yep.
artists that are just I don't know where to get their cover work. Steph Wilson is a great example of that, where I love
Right.
Steph Wilson's work. I think Steph Wilson
Hmm.
is great. I love the complete caricature of it, and I think it's brilliant, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And so he just did something for Sister Mercy. He did something for Chuck's book,
Yep.
The Lull.
Yep.
And so I back those projects not to read them. I like The Lull and I like Sister Mercy, but more because I want those covers. And then Jamie
Yeah.
Tyndall's
And
entire thing
and
was
and that's something
covers.
that we are still kind of getting a hold of. There's a particular person that may do a cover for Tilt 4. We've already asked them, they're interested, but if we work it out, then I think people might flip out if they were 90s comic book fans. Um, I think it'd be really cool because they do really good work. So hopefully that works out. Regardless, we did we did that splatter cover for Welcome to Everville, that first issue, and we didn't realize how much more popular that would be. Um, because not only did we, so basically we did a black, white, and red book, and it was just Welcome to Everville, and we just took colors out except for red, and then we did a black and white cover, and then Matt and I splattered red paint on the front, and now people are like, okay, well, how do I get that? Well, we only printed 100, and we decided, man, that's all we have. So 80 something of those went in the campaign. So once we're done with them, we're done with them. And we realized, oh, well, people are paying a lot more for this cover when we go to a show. And so now what we decided to do is, going forward, every Everville campaign, we're going to do a different character with the black and white and splatter, and so people can get the collector's one. Here's the stupid thing, and this is something to note for people. Our Welcome to Everville campaign, while it was a great campaign, we did $3,300. Um, that was the most stuff we'd ever given to people for such a cheap price. Like the $10 tier, that special cover was unlocked as a stretch goal. So that means every physical backer got this, special one-time cover. So that, that's going to up your shipping price. It also means you have to print a whole other book. And then they unlocked a bunch of stuff on that campaign. So for $10, people were getting both versions of the book. They were getting both trading cards. They got a wristband, an enamel pin. It was crazy. I mean, for $10, it was like we were just giving crap away. But we did really well with the money, and that paid for Tilt 3. Yeah, Tilt 3.
So just to talk about crazy rewards, I was speaking with Jamie Tyndall yesterday, and for $10, legitly, the stretch goals are insane. And that
Yeah,
once we hit 50,000 on his project, everybody's getting a big 11 by 17 print. And if you backed over 100, you're getting a metal version of that. And there's
that's
so
dope.
many rewards, and it's insane. One of the
Yeah.
best stretch goals that I've seen is signed books, and signed books are amazing. And by the way, a signed book, for those who don't know, means that you sign it, the book. So those are the best for
You
everybody
know,
checking it
we
out.
actually just for Tilt 3, I didn't sign any of the ones we shipped out. First, it was because I forgot, because we were exhausted while we were putting them together. But second, I was thinking back to the only complaint we ever get is when we do sign people's books, because they're like, "Oh, I'd rather you send this to me not signed." So we're like, "Okay, well, from here on out, I guess we're going to start a signed tier, or something where people can option to get the signature, which is feels bougie for me, like, because I don't think I'm at that level to have people request my
I hate
signature.
that.
But
I
then
hate
people
that.
email me and they're like, "Oh no, I need you to sign it," and I'm like, "Okay, well, I mean, I still have imposter syndrome. I don't know if I'll ever get over that."
I hate when people ask for more money to sign a book. I just think it's
Oh yeah, yeah. See, I wouldn't even do that. I would just do it as a separate tier. It'd be the same price, but it's like, no, just select that one. So in the Kickstarter rewards, I have a separate tier that I know this is the signed one.
I think it's wrong on a lot of levels, and I know that a bunch of people do it, and I think it's really wrong.
I don't
really
like it.
do.
I don't like it. It drives me nuts.
If
When I can go get, I, I don't want to drop names. There's like newer people.
I'll drop something with Jamie Tyndall for this matter. So at 7,500 bucks, Jamie Tyndall is signing all the books. Really cool. I'm not expecting that book to go up in value, but he doesn't have a signed tier, and he's just doing it to just be like nice, and it's really cool, and it's super.
Yeah, see, I think that's a clever way to do it, though. Is if you do have that kind of backing and resource and group to pull from, then yeah, just make it as a stretch goal.
And I'm excited for it because Jamie Tyndall doesn't sign at a con anyway. So but it's still nice to have. It's going to be a cool book to throw up on Instagram. It's going to be a fun book to read. But yeah. I think that's something that bothers me as a fan, unless you're getting like 10 people to sign, which is a different discussion.
Right.
But we could digress before we get you and me into trouble, because a lot of the people that do this are somewhat Facebook friends, so they're gonna attack me, and I'm not dropping their names. I'm sure you know the people I know, so clearly they know we're talking about them. But I do want to give you. I want to give you a quick plug to talk about Beards and Comics podcast and everything that's going with, and the journey and conquering and making everybody a better Kickstarter and comic writer and comic individuals and getting their products off the ground and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, it's been a really fun experience. We started it kind of just like we thought this would be fun. Maybe we'll do it once a month. Then people just really started asking questions. And the more we did it, the more we started meeting new people. And I think Chuck was the first guest we ever had on Beards and Comics. We've only been going since February. So the first break we took was Thanksgiving. And then, now I think we have one more episode. That's an hour-long one Thursday. And then we're off the next 2 weeks. Then we'll be back. But it's basically something that we came up with to be a resource for people that are getting into comics, or people that are in comics that just want to hear what it's like behind the scenes, being a creator, and things to think about. We've had some great guests. We've had, Chuck Pino has been on there a couple of times. Travis Gibbs, someone that's been on there a couple of times.
Both of them have been on a few times.
Yeah, of course. Because they're everywhere. We had, I'm trying to think of who else. We had our I don't even know what to call her anymore, our social media manager, who we stupidly hired to do a book. So now she doesn't do social media managing because she's busy learning how to do a comic book. But we had her on because we wanted people to hear from somebody that went to art school and to hear their progression into starting their first comic book. Joe DeSantos, we had him on. So we've done a couple of writers roundtables and a couple of artist roundtables. I think that helped a lot of people. We did a Kickstarter special with, Comics Tribes, James.
He's been on.
Tyler Vogel. I don't remember which order his name is. Vogel.
He's been on.
And then we answered a bunch of people's questions for that. Then towards the end of the year, we started getting a little bit more like I would just randomly reach out to people. So we had Mike Barron on for an episode or two episodes, just kind of talked about his history in comics. Todd Mulrooney, because we had Mike on. And then right after that, we had Tim Seeley, who for me, that was a big one because that is my favorite superhero is Nightwing. And Tim Seeley, he's been around for a little while now, but what he did with that character really inspired me. So just having him on, I was like, I'm good now. And then we kind of took it back to our roots. For some reason, people keep telling us that they like it when it's just Matt and I, it's just answering questions and talking. So we're kind of doing a little bit something special for that. That's going to be separate. And then, we're just looking forward to next year. We had Tier on from Sovereign Comics. I don't know if you've had him on yet, but super cool dude. Very knowledgeable in marketing.
Tyrone? You mean Tyrone?
Yeah, man.
He's been on twice.
Yeah, man. So he's a newer friend for me. That's that's one of the things that people will notice
in Colorado.
Kind of the growth of the show is we kind of jumped ponds a little bit, where we had this one group, and then you're starting to see a little bit more of another group of creators, and it's just the nature of the game. But Tier's been on. I'll be on his live stream tomorrow. So he's become a new friend, a new acquaintance. He's been really cool. And next year, I think we're gonna start it off with giving everyone a recap of how we felt about our comic stuff in 2020. And we're starting to lay out the episodes. I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself on it though, because as you know, people's stuff changes. We might try to have Jason Brubaker come back on, because he did a campaign right after he was on our show, and I think people would probably like to hear from him for an update. But yeah, I don't know. It's just been fun. And the entire point of the show is what it's like behind the scenes as a creator, things to think about, our processes. I plan to get a little bit more into that next year for the writers, to get a little bit more into my actual process, because I've only ever kind of really talked about it from an outward perspective, but I want people to really see how I approach it. Not because I think my way is the right way. The only thing I can drop is I went to college for this stuff. I taught creative writing, so maybe that gives me a leg up. Like I said, I don't think I'm anything special, but I have fun doing it, and I think I can at least show people a little bit better of a way to organize their thoughts, because one of the biggest things I see in comics is a lot of unorganized thoughts that form a story. And if you take some of those and you just flip them and put them together in different ways, it probably makes it a lot more coherent and a lot more fun and entertaining. So yeah, Beards and Comics podcast, we're everywhere that you get podcasts. Check it out. We got, I don't remember how many episodes, 45 or something like that. But yeah, just been going since February, and it's been a blast.
And then you already promoted that. So anything else you'd like to promote? Because obviously that comic, we spoke a lot about, a lot of Kickstarter stuff. Where can people check out Catalyst Comics and social media and all that fun stuff?
Yep. Definitely check out Catalyst Comics Studio. One thing you guys will notice about Matt and I is most of the time we don't even talk about ourselves. This is weird for me to be on here without Matt, because most of the time everything we do is we point it back to Catalyst Comics Studio. We would rather people recognize that name than either of our names. And it's not being boastful or anything. It's just that's what we want people to know. That's what we want people to enjoy and fall in love with. So for us, the next big thing is I'll say it. So we're planning on a new campaign in February for a brand new book that's going to be a spy espionage story. It's called One Last Job. We have a great artist on that, and I think people are really going to dig it. It's going to be our first black and white comic, because people are really digging those lately. And it's not really anything that I'm super huge into, but I thought this would be a good style story, just to have something grungy and black and white for an espionage story. So that'll be dropping in February on Kickstarter. We have really stupid ideas for the rewards. And I think if people are into random just spy stuff, then they're going to love some of the dumb ideas that we have for it. Because that's what we do now, is we just think of dumb stuff that we can put into our Kickstarters, because, I don't know, people like that. And then, then we're gearing up for Tilt 4, ending that story arc. We are doing a show in early January. I don't want to drop too much about it, but Joe DeSantos, he's gonna drop some behind the scenes stuff for what we're doing for Tilt 4. It's a little bit bigger than I think we planned, but somebody offers to do something, we let them do it. I think that's it. Yeah.
And then where
Catalyst
can people?
Comics Studio everywhere.
And then,
go ahead.
Yeah. So that's perfect. So obviously, if you just type it into Google, it'll pop up. Pretty much.
Yeah, we have a website. We're trying to revamp. So we have a really nice website, if I might toot my own horn. That's one of my background things, is I do graphic design and web design. But yeah, so our website, you'll notice a little bit of a change coming at the beginning of the year. I'm going to add a new section that's pretty much dead set. I'm calling it the Hub, and it's going to have new links because we're revamping the way we use these different social media platforms. We have a couple Beards and Comics Live the once a month show that we do with other creators who have active stuff. You guys will notice that that's changing over to the YouTube only. So we're trying to filter more traffic over there. And then I guess I can announce it here too. The coffee run, which is on our YouTube, we've done one episode. And for some reason, everyone's been badgering us. It's been like 8-9 months now since we did that. People keep badgering us about bringing it back. And it's just the stupidest thing. It's just Matt and I sitting in the car talking about, like, the first episode was if we believed in aliens. And it's because somebody asked us that. And it's just us going to get coffee talking about dumb stuff. And for some reason, everyone has been like, when's this coming back? And so we're bringing it back. So we'll drop that little teaser in early January as well. But that'll be YouTube only. And then Facebook, I'm trying to gear more toward the longer posts and more promotional side of stuff. And then Instagram's going to be more of the imagery side. I don't know. I'm trying to revamp stuff just to test algorithms and see what works better.
Well,
bear with us, I guess, is my thing.
Well, obviously, pretty much people should just follow you, and I'm sure they're going to be informed. And I've been saying this with everybody else because we're about to wrap up, but obviously, go support indie comics. Definitely support Catalyst Comics. You can buy the first 2 issues of Tilt. I don't know, can you buy issue 3 digitally yet?
Yeah, so right now on our website you can buy Tilt 1 and 2, Paradigm number 1, Silhouette Shadow Games, and Fire by Night. So you can buy all that on our website, and then Tilt 3 will be. We have a show this weekend in South Carolina, and everything's shipping out. So I want to say maybe January 1st we'll have it available on the website. Just because we're supposed to be doing Disappearing December. As you can tell, I'm obviously horrible at it because I'm on a live stream. But I'm trying not to do anything Catalyst, like posting wise, until January 1. But that will probably be day one. Is just Tilt 3 is available on the website now because everyone should have their packages before then.
And so obviously you can get it there. And as I've been saying with everybody and everything, obviously right now, if money's tight for you, you should be taking care of yourself. You should be focusing on your family. Obviously, Christmas is coming up. You should be keeping your lights on, food on your table, all that stuff. Things are crazy in the United States. Doesn't matter where you're politically. Stay safe, make sure you're healthy and all that stuff before you go back anybody's project. But if you have
know what? We did do something for everybody, and that's that if they want to read Tilt issue 1, it is free. And all you have to do is go on our website and give us your email address, and we send it right to your inbox. And you can read Tilt 1 digital free. And I think we dropped issue 2 to like 99 cents or something. But yeah, like you just said, if you don't have the money, then hey, just go grab the digital copy of Tilt. Maybe you'll like it. And if you didn't, guess what? You didn't spend any money on it.
And
use one of those 20 emails that you just use for spam and for signing up for crap. Just give us one of those. We'll take it.
And then even going beyond that, one of the things that I've been saying that is super important right now is that obviously you have the Facebook page and the YouTube stuff. And I would imagine you have an Instagram. And I don't know if you have a Twitter, but if you have a Twitter, obviously all that stuff is free. So if you're keeping your electricity, your internet, your food on the table, and you're just protecting yourself, or you're anticipating things are about to get a lot worse, and you just want some extra money, and might sound crazy, but $1 can make the difference in your life in many ways for a lot of people. That's still no excuse if you have electricity to go support somebody and follow them on social media, because all that stuff is free. And at this point in the game, and I'm calling people out, where if you're not supporting somebody on social media and liking their post or retweeting a tweet or putting a heart on Facebook or giving their page a like or even just checking out their website, and all that stuff is free. I mean, at this point, and you like what they do but you can't afford it, it kind of means you're freeloading. And it's time that it's a very cheap way how to step up. And so I encourage everybody, and even if you buy it, still do it. You don't have to like everybody on every single social media platform. If you're not a YouTube guy or a girl, but you're a Facebook person, that's the place where you should be. And you don't have to comment on every single post either, but you should definitely be throwing a like here or a heart there or a retweet here or a heart on Instagram.
For sure.
at this point, if you can't afford something, especially if you can't, that's super cheap and it's super effective. And so please go do that with every indie comic and everything that you like. Go support it because it means the difference. Because I know that when people give me a like or give me a heart or shoot me a message say, hey, good job on that one, or really enjoyed it, or way to go, it means so much to me in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Even if they're not buying anything from me. So that's where I'm at.
Especially if you read any of our stuff. Like if you read any of our stuff and you like it, just tell one of us on the Catalyst team. You don't know how much that makes our week, like not even day. We'll sail off that stuff for a week easy. It does mean a lot, and it affects our mindset, going into new projects and stuff. It's important for all of us podcasters, all this stuff. Like if you like any of our content, let us know. So one way or the other, whether it's a private message or public, it makes us feel really good.
Yeah, so on that note, I think we're about to wrap up, but I'm going to give you the final word.
One word?
Or a message. You got 60 seconds on the clock.
Yeah, so the biggest message that you'll hear from Catalyst Comics, there's really two. There's our mantra, which is read outside the box. We're very big advocates for indie comics and for indie comics creators. But more importantly than anything else, whether you like comics, whether you like anime, no matter what it is, our biggest preaching point is this one thing: do better, be better. That's it.
I think that's a wrap right there. So thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me, man. Super enjoyed it.